Well, here we are again. Every so often there's a big gacha game that releases that promises to kill the big boys, and it never does, but why be tribalistic when you can have multiple cakes instead of just the one? In unrelated news, my doctor told me to start losing weight, can't imagine why. So, Arknights Endfield. Its biggest USP is probably the factory stuff, but otherwise it's not too dissimilar to the other open world gachas that dominate the space at the moment. Now, I'm a very goal-oriented kind of person, so naturally I decided the best stopping point, if you want to call it that, was the Platinum Trophy. If you've been around here a while, that's not a surprise, and if you're not, take a peek at the channel and you'll see it's very common. I'm not going to mention every trophy, as some are self-explanatory, or I managed to get them just randomly in combat, so I wouldn't have anything to add on them. The first thing I decided pretty early on was that I was not going to focus on any trophies until I finished the main story, or at least to where the main story was at the time. The main reason for this is because I figured that the game would lock areas away until you get a certain ways into the story, which I'm pretty sure is correct. I didn't actually check to see if you can just go to the areas before getting there in the story, so I'm just going to assume I'm right. As I said, I'm talking about the 1.0 story because I don't know when this video is coming out, so we could be on version 17. Pretty unlikely, but it could happen. The story itself is straightforward as they always are, but boy did it feel long. Now, I'm not going to judge a gacha game for having a serviceable main story for the 1.0 version, because most of them do if you look through them all. The good stuff generally comes a lot later when the player base is more attached to the world and characters, and maybe also the writers get more familiar with it. The story does do my absolute least favourite trope though, that being where the main character has amnesia but they're already a super important respected figure. I think amnesia only really works when you gradually figure out what's going on. It's less effective when you wake up and your catgirl wife gasses you up the whole time. I can't believe that this is the second gacha that does this trope that I've played recently, but let's move on. As I said, story felt long, and I actually did get my ass kicked on some of the bosses, specifically the Valley 4 final one. Reason for that is that I am very much the type of player that will not get gear at all at lower levels because I know I'm going to need to replace it. So I just end up bashing my head against the wall until I eventually get through what I'm stuck on. But I do appreciate that the game actually lets me lose. There's no BS, your iron will stopped you from getting knocked down, or anything like that. So yeah, story takes ages and I didn't personally find it super engaging. It's not terrible, I'm not saying I had a bad time, but it really could have been better. Also, now's probably a good time to mention that I've never played the original Arknights, nor have I watched the anime. I'm aware of its existence, but I don't have any idea on what the plot's about, or any lore, or anything like that. Anyway, just beating the 4 chapters of Valley 4 and the 2 chapters of Wuling gives you 5 trophies. The only other story-related trophy is the one for beating the 4 companion quests. Only thing to really note on that is that they weren't all available at launch. They had like staggered releases, and actually at time of writing the last of these isn't out yet. You can tell how far in advance I write this, but otherwise there's nothing more to say on here from a gameplay or trophy perspective. Slight side tangent, but on a few of these other gacha game videos, I get told that I play the game wrong because I only care about the trophies, and so I'm just going to push back on that right there a little bit. The videos, yes, are about the trophies because that's what the channel's about. But make no mistake, I'm playing the game properly, if you want to call it that, to have fun and enjoy the story and gameplay. I recognise that might not come through too much in the videos, but that's because the focus of the videos is the trophies. With that anecdote out of the way, let's get to probably the aspect of the game that is probably the most likely to drive people away, and that is the factory system. Now, to get it out of the way though, I like the factory system. It's super satisfying to set it up to consistently create the items without needing to go pick anything. Like, I have like 10,000 explosives because I just left it going and forgot about it. I'm never going to need 10,000 explosives, but if I do, there they are for whatever reason. Currently, I have everything just making batteries that I can sell to raise the outpost levels, as they sell for a good amount, the batteries do. However, despite my affinity for the factory system, originally I avoided it as much as I could. And the reason for that is quite simple. The tutorials are just too much, man. They give you way too much information at once, making it really hard to keep track of it all. Let me be real for a second, I focus one thing at a time. Say I need a specific material for gear, I will ignore everything else and only focus on making that material I need, and that made me realise, yeah, really this factory is quite simple. It's just lining up the right belt with the right machines, and then having them go to the next machine in sequence. Like, I know that's obvious, but actually sitting down and focusing one thing helps me figure everything out. So yeah, it's not that the system is particularly difficult to comprehend, it's just the tutorials make it seem more complicated than it actually is, at least in my opinion. The factory isn't directly tied to any trophies, but indirectly you bet it is. All the gear is made from materials that is most easily got by the factory system. Gear is obviously helpful for increasing power, which is useful for doing the higher level challenges. Like, you need to max level a character and a weapon for trophies, and the materials are obviously a lot easier to get if you have stronger characters. You also need to get Valley 4 to Outpost level 9, as that's the last level that unlocks mining spots, and you need to be mining on every spot at once for another trophy. You can do this quite a few ways, but generally you're gonna need Valley credits. As I said earlier, I did this by just making a ton of batteries and then selling them to the 3 outposts, which also levels them up, which raises the outpost level. Valley credits are also used to upgrade the little owl things that give you materials after a certain amount of time, which you need to max level the ship for another trophy. It's practically impossible to do these without the factory, which I'm sure won't appeal to everyone, how it's all interconnected like that. A lot of the platinum time is spent waiting, to be honest. Waiting for materials, needing to do dailies for EXP, definitely needing to wait for sanity to get level up materials. That doesn't mean there's nothing that requires actual, playing the game though. There's quite a few exploration-based trophies. First off, you need to unlock all the Wuling and Valley 4 AIC technologies. You unlock these by fixing the robots. This is one of the only Wuling trophies in the game at the moment. Presumably they're going to add more of these once more areas and stories come out in later updates. They might have even already done it by the time this comes out. As such, there's also way more of these in Valley 4, but it's mostly just a case of finding all the robots on the map and then fixing them with a very fun puzzle. That's one thing I'll always give gacha games, these open world ones. I generally always like the puzzles. You also need 50 Orleans in Valley 4. Looking at the interactive map, there's 166, so that's more than enough, and indeed I just got this while going through the story. Didn't need to go out of my way at all for it. The biggest of the exploration trophies is for finding 270 chests in Valley 4. One thing I do really like is that the game tells you how many of each collectible is on each area of the map. Saves me a bit of time needing to go to every single area they could possibly be. You need to get 270 chests, as I said, and Valley 4 has a total of 288 chests. Now that is so close that I do question why they didn't just make the trophy for collecting all of them, but whatever, it's slightly easier I guess, thank you. There's not much to note here though, I just pulled up the interactive map and went to each chest to see if I'd already gotten them. The only potential thing to note is that some chests are locked behind side quests, but there might be enough to where you don't need to worry about them, but even if there's not, the quests are pretty short, so it's not a big deal. The final thing is the Umbral Monument, which is essentially the endgame mode, I think, which also was not available at launch. Might just be me, but this felt like it took absolutely ages to come out. The best part about this mode is that you only need one team at present, unlike similar modes in other games where you need 2 or even 3 teams. Now, I'm not saying they won't eventually add a multiple team mode, but I'm glad at this early point in the game they realised just how long it takes to build a full team, and it does take ages. It feels like it takes quite a bit longer to level a character than in other games, maybe as a trade-off for not needing to deal with that goddamn random sub-stat gear system from Genshin and all those other ones. Probably my favourite part of the game is that you don't have to do that. Anyway, the mode itself is fine, it's just your regular combat challenge. Normal mode isn't difficult, the enemies are only level 60, which for me, I had geared up a minimum level 80 Lavatine team ready to go, so Lavatine, Wolfguard, Akakuri, Ardelia. The harder difficulty one, they're level 90, which yes is considerably harder, but the strategy doesn't really change, it's just a case of dodging better if I failed. The timer was never an issue, and that is actually another thing. There's no multiple star ratings for beating it quickly, you just get all the rewards for just beating the stage. The hardest one of these was probably the second one in the second set on hard mode, where there's 2 of the charging guys. If you defeat one without the other, the second one ends up getting a lot stronger over time. So what I did is just lower them both to really low HP before defeating either of them. The whole thing was easier than I expected, but if you know your gachas, you know that endgames get considerably harder over time with inflation or just power creep in general. So for achievement and trophy hunters, it is always best to get this out of the way as early as you possibly can. But that was the final trophy I actually needed to get, and with that, I'd done it. I'd platinumed Arknights Endfield. So after all that, what do I think about the game? Generally positive in the gameplay sense. I don't play gacha games as a hardcore gacha player anymore, like I don't do my dailies, and generally I just play when I want to play. So I'm maybe not the best person to ask if you're a gacha hardcore. Like, as instance, I haven't mentioned the gacha system at all, and that's because I truly don't care. I never learnt the specifics of it, so you're better off watching literally anyone else talk about that stuff. I just pulled when I had stuff until I got the limited character at the moment, and then once I got them, I stopped and waited for the next one. The factory stuff is the game's most unique feature, and honestly, I prefer it to the normal gameplay. The combat felt really slow, especially so early on. Admittedly, later on it gets a bit faster and more enjoyable and more difficult as you get to higher leveled enemies with proper teams, but it still just doesn't feel quite right, or perhaps it's just not as good as its contemporaries. It could just be that I never adjusted to it. Similar to how there's no climbing, right? It feels like such a staple in this kind of game that it not being there really threw me off. The areas are designed around this though, so it's not an issue in terms of game design. It's just something that I wasn't used to and threw me off a lot. The tutorials for the factory stuff felt way too detailed, but the blueprints are a massive help for players who might not be able to get to grips with it, still allowing them to easily make materials without having to spend an hour figuring out everything. Personally, I found the story could be improved somewhat. I don't have any massive complaints, but it also never really managed to grip me. It was just kind of there. As I said, it's early doors, so I'm not completely out, but I'd like them to step it up a bit. As far as trophies go, it's pretty simple. The vast majority are collectible related, and yes, you might need to go out of your way to get all those chests, but gacha players are known for fully emptying the world for 2 pulls, so I'm sure you can manage. I do think these big open world gachas kind of have all ended up with the same sort of trophy list, mostly just getting the chests and stuff, going through the quests, plus maybe the end game. Will I keep playing the game? Probably not consistently, but popping in when there's new story or trophies, that I can do. Can't wait to see my full storage from where I've left the factory making batteries for when I get back. And that's the video. Have you been playing the game? How have you found it? Are you going to keep playing or take a break like me? Let me know all that and more in the comments down below, and while you're down there, why not subscribe? It's free, helps me out, and gives you easier access to all my videos, both old and new. They're all achievement and trophy related, and there's even some gacha ones, which I'm assuming you're at least okay with if you watch this video. I find it interesting to approach gachas like this, because most content creators focus on them and are playing daily, so this is a bit of a different perspective, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching this video to the end. For now though, I'm off, hunt them tropes, and I'll see you next time.